Morning, everybody. First of all, thank you all for your candor, for your honesty. I look around the room and I see and hear a lot of courage. And so I want to thank you all for that. And that's not me being patriotic, being totally serious, because it's really hard to sit up in front of a room and talk about what you're afraid of, right? I mean, how many people here are used to talking about what they're afraid of every day? You walk around and say, hey, hi, nice to meet you, I'm afraid of spiders. No, right? I mean, in reality, we're all afraid of having an unfulfilled life, right? Or having a life that we think is fulfilled because we prioritize the wrong things. And then we realize after, 10, 15, 20, 30 years in the wrong job or the wrong situation or the convenient situation that it's not what was right for us, right? And circumstances, for whatever reason, drove us to take that path that we took, as opposed to us driving our own path. So that's what we're talking about today. And I'm gonna deviate from this a little because I wrote it a certain way, but then I'm hearing some amazing things that I want to cover, but I want to talk about that I think can really benefit and really work to help everyone in the room, and I think we could go that direction. So, setting intentions. What are we talking about today? Some of these, again, are going to change, but we're going to learn the distinction between internal and external validation. Definitely going to answer the questions, or begin to answer the questions. Begin because who we are is always evolving, right? It doesn't matter if you're 5 years old or 75 years old. Who we are is always evolving. We're always growing in one way or another, right? It's our job to make that an intentional growth in the direction that drives us to be happy, right? Now we want to be empowered to redefine the way others see and interact with you. That's going to be a really powerful one as well. And we want to combat imposter syndrome, less so, because I feel like everyone here has pretty much got that knocked down. And then avoid the midlife crisis, and those two things are related, but that's where we're going to deviate. Those last two, we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit. So, most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions, their lives are mimicry, and their passions are quotation. This is especially true today as you look at social media and look at all these things. People are creating these lives that don't actually exist, and they're just because they want likes, right? They want somebody to give them a thumbs up and say, hey, good job with that trip that you spent X amount of money on that you actually probably had, right? And you're getting whatever for that. You get some kind of an adrenaline boost from that, or a serotonin burst. But what's the value of that, right? If it doesn't really light you up, if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, what's the point of doing it, right? So let's start with that. There we go. Okay, cool. All right. So who am I? That's me. In case you're wondering. So I'm a leadership and identity coach and consultant. Identity is my own kind of a niche that I'm carving for myself because I realize that there's a piece of coaching that really, consistent theme in coaching that whenever I coach, whether they're leadership development, whether it's career coaching, whether it's life coaching, whatever it is that I coach someone, is an ongoing theme of people not really taking time to identify who they are or really be intentional about that. And that's really what drives people to have unsatisfactory lives for themselves. Recovering attorney, so I feel your pain. And a full anti-project manager. That's relevant because I've seen the dark side of things in terms of going to a career that you feel obligated to go to, right? The money, the drive, the circumstances, it just takes you in that direction. Like, oh, I'm making enough money, I'm making so much money, why would I go somewhere else? Why would I look for something else? This is so convenient and so comfortable. Why would I intentionally give myself discomfort, right? Why do that to yourself? I like to say I'm an aspiring Renaissance man, serial entrepreneur, artist, author, wanderlust, TV and cinema nerd, and probably the most important thing for me personally recently is I'm a proud owner of a Shiba Retriever, and this guy is brand new. I got him last week. Rescue dogs. Rescue is very, very important to me. It's my personal values, and so I like to say that. Now, why are these things relevant to me, for you mentioned to you? What does it matter? Well, this matters to me, right? This is part of my identity. It's how I define myself. And we'll get to that in a second for you guys. So, what is identity? It's more than just who am I, right? It's the lens through which you interact with the world and through which the world interacts with you. Think of it like a filter, right? All the information you're taking in the world is filtered through this identity lens, right? And if that's not aligned to who you want to be or who you actually are, you're going to see the world in a very skewed fashion. And on the flip side, the world's going to see you in a skewed fashion. Who here has met somebody, and when you first meet him, something's off? Like, they don't seem like who they say they are, or they don't seem like, just something feels off, right? That person's not being authentic with who they are, or just being authentic with you. And for whatever reason, maybe they are who they say they are, but they just don't feel it. You don't feel the confidence in what they're saying. That's what I mean by that. Their identity is a little off, right? Maybe they have imposter syndrome. Maybe they really are trying to be like that thing, but they don't feel aligned with it yet, right? They're not comfortable with it yet. So there's contextual, relational identity. Those are the same thing pretty much, whether you call them that or not. And then there's absolute identity. Now we'll get to that second. All right, so there's a quick activity. This is going to be interactive, by the way, so get ready. Take 3 minutes total. Think about what 3 words would you say describe you, and then what 3 words would you say other people would use to describe you. All right. So take 2 minutes, and then we'll do a quick share test with the person next to you. So take a second, go for it. I'll tell you what they do. What the difference was? How many people here were aligned perfectly with what other people think of them?
I mean, I'm aligned like in 2 of the 3, but one of them is like, I feel I'm lazy, but others see me doing too much.
So opposites.
Yeah.
Okay, who else had something similar? Anyone?
I had that I think of myself as brave. Other people think of me as confident. So I think there's a little bit of
kind of aligned, yeah.
Like, it kind of aligns, but also it kind of doesn't.
Yeah.
Because it's to do with sort of maybe self-perception there. Right. That I maybe wouldn't assume myself as being confident, but I would say I was brave.
Yeah, it's a little distinct.
Yeah, it's more distinct.
Yeah, interesting. Anyone else? Observations?
So one of the things I said to describe myself is that I'm both big picture and detailed. And I think what other people tend to see is the detailed part and not the big picture part, which I regret, you know.
Yeah, I was told that I was intense and focused, which is true, but when I describe myself, I don't think in those terms, but they're absolutely true. I consider myself more of a planner. And so it was interesting to get the perspective, no, John, you're intense. So it's nice to get that feedback.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because you look at these things and you think about it, you know, you have this impression of yourself, right, and how you project to the world. But that also, there's a give and take between the world's reaction to you and your reaction to yourself, and then how you reflect that back to people, right? So what you show to the world is not always what you show to yourself, right? And so the problem is, can't be a problem, is that we tend to hide parts of ourselves, right? Parts of ourselves that we don't think the world needs to see or wants to see. And the problem is that's still part of you, right? I'm not saying you gotta necessarily say show everyone everything all the time. That's not what I'm saying. But the power in saying, or at least conveying what you're afraid of, right? Because we hide that all the time, right? Is that someone can actually help you, right? Someone can actually cater to that and be like, I can actually help you with that fear, or that's not a fear that you need to have because of an X, right? And so when we define ourselves, we also define ourselves by our fear. The problem is we let our fear define us and not the other way around, right? We don't define ourselves by our fear, but we let our fear define us. Does that make sense? Do you see the distinction there? One is intentional, one is not. When we let our fear define us, that's a completely passive thing. We react to our fear. When we define ourselves by our fear, we acknowledge, yes, I'm afraid of heights, for example, right? But I acknowledge that, but it's not defining me. I'm not that guy who's afraid of heights. I'm just afraid of heights, right? And I can overcome that if I choose to. All right? So, that brings us to contextual relational identity. This is how you relate to everything else, how the environment and you relate to each other, right? You can take different shapes in different situations. With your family, you're a certain way, right? With your friends, you're a certain way. With work, you're a certain way, right? Those can be completely different people in some ways, right? If you ask your parents how you are, I doubt they're going to say that you're the same as your friends say you are. Maybe some things are going to be common, but there'll be some differences as well. I know for me there are. It's good. It's not. Neither one of these is bad, by the way. No part of identity is bad, including your fears, by the way. But it allows for flexibility because you can adapt to different situations. If you have a weak contextual identity, you're not going to feel comfortable in any situation. You're going to go only where you're comfortable, right? It's great for teamwork, right? People who have strong contextual identities are really, really great working with teams because they can adapt and work with other people and really, really make up for other people's where they fall short and vice versa, right? Now the problem is that it depends completely on external factors, right? This part of your identity, you have no control over it. This is where you're saying, oh, I define myself by X. That's what defines me, right? And so as a result, that piece of it you have no control over. And so you're completely dependent on that for that. Now, absolute identity is fundamental to who you are, who you are, like your being. It's your values, right? The way you were raised, what your core beliefs are, right? It doesn't change unless you intend to make an actual change for that, right? If you intend to be something else, you want to be a better leader, right? You want to be a better public speaker. These things are things you can change, but they're fundamental parts of your being, right? They're not impacted by external factors, right? If you believe that the sky's blue, it doesn't matter if you're with your friends, with your family, with wherever, the sky's going to be blue to you, right? If you believe that you're intelligent, it doesn't matter where you are, you're going to believe you're intelligent, right? Now that can be slightly influenced by like being, sorry, the question?
Can I be like a jerk?
Go for it.
It depends on who you're with. It depends on who you're with. Like,
In terms of-
I can feel really intelligent because I'm with dumb people, but then people super smart and I may feel dumb.
Sure.
Okay, I just want to make sure I do that out there.
No, I was just saying that. Yeah, absolutely. If you're rooming with people from Mensa, for example, you might feel a little less intelligent. But in the grand scheme of things,
And in real life,
Yeah.
I'm smart. Okay.
in real life, no, that's important, right? We just said it's very important in real life, right? Let's go back to real life. Because that's you separating contextual from absolute, right?
Okay, thank you.
So how you are in real life, as opposed to, because so that means those two things are still aligned, right? You're not saying you're dumb because you're not room, because then you wouldn't have any kind of absolute identity,
Right.
right? In general, I'm still smart, but here I'm not as smart as
I think I am. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
There you go.
I
Makes
just want to
sense?
make sure I was good. Okay.
I have a question though, and
Sure.
this may not be applicable to everyone, but for someone like me and millions of other attorneys in the world,
Mhm.
our life is defined, our identity is defined by what we do. And there isn't much time for many who have to work hard at what they do
Mhm.
to do anything else.
Yep.
So my question with this is, I still have my own internal, confidence, identity, who I
Sure.
am, team player, all that stuff. But it's always defined in the context of the job.
Always?
Always.
So before you go to bed?
I'm constantly thinking about it because I'm not doing it anymore. And it's something that I was doing very well, very successfully, not without, consequences to family life or whatever, typical things. But that was my identity,
Yep.
to me.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, I would always take work home with me. I would always think about it. The reason I watched idiot TV programs was to just kind of like let my brain, go somewhere else.
Yep.
But there are a lot of people like me
Mhm.
who their identity is really what their job has been, particularly if it's been a career or a profession that they've been involved most of their life. I mean, when you get up into the 40 plus, 50 plus, 60 plus range, millennials don't feel that. They don't. And I know from the junior associates or the new associates who come and start at a firm and get training and everything, they don't really care if this is their future job.
Mm-hmm.
They want to learn, they work hard, but it's not their life.
Right.
Whereas our generation is totally different. It was our life.
So you mind if I give you a coaching for a second? Okay. I would submit that that's still contextual identity because it's not fundamental to who you are. It's how you define yourself. I don't deny that. You defined yourself by that for so long, right? And I agree. The older generation, the generation before my parents' generation, their parents' generation, everyone, pretty much until the millennials now, that generation, those generations before us have always defined themselves primarily by their jobs, right? And by what they did, because it was customary to stay in a job for 20, 30 years. Now it's every 3, 4 years, 5 years you're jumping jobs, right? But that's still contextual identity because it's not fundamental to who you are. If you take you and you move to Mars tomorrow, and all the jobs are really different, there are no attorney jobs in Mars. Are you still an attorney, or are you? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean. So because it still depends on your surroundings, depending on what's out there. What you are, the core essence of you. You weren't born an attorney, is what I'm saying. Right? At a certain point, you became an attorney, and you started choosing to define yourself as an attorney. And that identity, that contextual identity, became stronger and stronger and stronger, and reinforced over the course of your career, right? To the point where that's all you knew. I mean, an analogy is athletes, professional athletes, right? You start at 6 years old playing football or basketball or baseball or any sport, right? And you're trained from that period of time to be an athlete, to get a full ride to a school, to be that basically a professional athlete in college. Not officially professional, but pretty much, right? Then you get drafted to the NBA, right? Week 2, bust out your knee, you're done. Career's over. Now what? You can't play the game anymore. Your whole life, essentially, 6 years old to now, to like 19 years old. Now you can't play that game anymore. What happens? Depression sets in. What do I do now? I have no idea what to do. I've only known this my entire life. But it's not your identity. It's not your absolute identity. It's your contextual identity because that's what you've known, right? Just because that's all you've known or that's all you've defined does not mean that's your absolute identity. It just seems that way because that's all you've made it a point to know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I understand what he's saying though, because I spent 10 years in advertising and then I lost that job.
Mm-hmm.
And I was crushed because my whole life had been advertising. I didn't know who I was without advertising.
Absolutely.
And so I had learned not to put my whole identity into a job and not become the job. I had to learn to separate myself, my identity, from the job. And so in that case, what I learned to do was stop going the same places I went to when I was in advertising and stop doing, break the habits that you had when you were in that profession and start to do something else, learn something else. In my case, I went back to school. But, I think you have to consciously do something else to find your identity and define your identity separate from what you've lost in order to move forward.
So I agree 100% except for one thing you said. Finding identity. It's not about finding it, it's about creating it.
Okay.
You're not going to find it out there.
Yeah,
right?
you
Finding
have
it implies it's out there somewhere. Right?
What's
Where's my identity? I don't know. It's right here. Right? Your absolute identity. Yeah, a concept contextual is always around you. Right? Like you said, but exactly what you said. You have to create new habits, right? Create new situations that can break those old habits if you need to do that. And going back to school is a great way to do that. But sorry.
I was about to say, because she said find it, I said it's more like creating your identity, because I know when I was a mother and I was married, I don't even think people really knew who I was because I was so-and-so's mother, so-and-so's wife. But now that I'm divorced without children, people actually know who I am and what my name is because I'm in a different environment. I don't have children, I still have children, but they're grown. So I'm a mother, but they don't see me as a mother. I'm who I want to be. So I've created a new identity that doesn't connect me to being a mother or a wife or ex-wife. It's just who Jackie is. Even on my Facebook page, I never use my last names because they will connect me to who I was. I want them to know only me by my first and middle name because I'm creating the identity that I want them to see.
It's your own brand, right? I mean, anything, the general rule is anything anyone can take away from you is contextual identity. It's not absolute, right? Like a job, right? Like, unfortunately your family, right? It's great to value those things. I'm never going to say not to value these things, right? I want to distinguish those two things. You can value your job, you can value your family, you can value everything around you, but don't just define yourself by those things.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a really lucky situation. I'd worked in a school, the same school for 25 years. I was an assistant principal at the school. I lived in the community, and I felt almost like that was crushing me. I couldn't go out with my kids because I'd get stopped by ex-students and parents, and I got a real gift in one sense, being able to come here where I knew nobody, literally nobody, and this is almost a mindset thing where I struggled for a few months, just kind of thinking, what is everything? What crazy country have I come to? And then
whole other conversation.
Yeah, I would say, Britain's not one necessarily at the moment to be claiming to be any better, but after that little tricky spell, it's a mindset thing, and I've kind of gone, this actually is great. I was far too defined to a degree, much as I tried not to be, by being that I lived in a little goldfish bowl really, and to come out here and to not have that as I've looked at it as a kind of blessing rather than something that's restricted me.
Yeah.
Because it's enabled me, I've had time to reflect on what my values are, why I did what I did for so long, and there are good reasons for that, and there are bad reasons for that. But I've tried to focus on the good things, because I don't think actually I was going to get anywhere if I just sat there and kicked the cat around, because that wasn't. And I saw this as a really great opportunity to do that, and it's still difficult. But it's still something you've got to be working on all the time. But
yeah, no one says it's easy, right? Defining those two things, distinguishing these two identities, it seems, it's easy to define on paper, but when you come down to actual real life, right, what can you really separate from yourself, right? That's you versus your surroundings. And so here's a little diagram to show. There's the world, right? The world has information coming at you all the time. Right? It's all information, it's all feedback, it's all noise, essentially. That's contextual identity, right? That's the external world that's out there. That's your identity. Now it's filters, you can see the difference. It filters into what's called story, right? And there's a story you're telling yourself at this point, because this is still part of you now. You're now taking that information and interpreting it in a certain way, whether that's helping you or hurting you is, again, within your control. But it's still story, right? And then it goes to your absolute identity, right? And that controls what actually gets through to your view, right? Now, that also applies the other way around too. You send stuff out, and it gets filtered to the rest of the world, right? Now, these two are really powerful filters, right? This is not really, but essentially we all have glasses on. We're looking at the world. You mentioned the fish bowl, right? The goldfish in a bowl. If you ask the goldfish, if a goldfish could talk, if you ask the goldfish, how's the water? What is he going to say? It's wonderful. Too cold.
That's what he's used to. So.
But then what is he going to say? He's not going to say fine. He's going to say what water. Who said? Yeah. He's going to say what water. He doesn't realize he's living in water. That's his whole. That's all he's ever known. It's his whole world. So just like the goldfish, we're living in this goldfish of a bowl that we call our lives, that we call our identity. They're filtering everything through. They're like, oh, how's your identity today? No one's asked the question. Anyone who asks a question probably needs to go to a mental institution. But that question's not going to come up because no one ever acknowledges that we have our own glasses on. That we've seen the world, our experiences, our knowledge, our feelings, everything that all the stories we tell ourselves. Those are glasses that keep having different shades of them, right? Whether they've been traumatic or amazing events in our lives, they filter those glasses. That's what these things are here, right? This is a great quote from Dr. Seuss. I miss these kind of books because they don't have many of these nowadays with for kids. But be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. Right? Mm-hmm. Who matters more than anybody? You do. To yourself. Right? So when you start minding what matters to you, then you got to figure out where that distinction is, right? All right, so misaligned identity, victim mentality is number one that I see today nowadays, especially with the younger generation. Sorry, Sam. Right? Everyone is always looking for someone else to blame. It's it's society. Oh, it's the media. Oh, it's that person. It's this person. It's always I can always find something else somewhere else to project my issues on. But in reality, how do you take responsibility for yourself? Right? There's always some way you trace it back. There's a choice you made at a certain point, right? That could have changed your life in a different way. The opposite is being over self-critical. Take responsibility for everything. Oh, the sun rose on the west today. Damn, it's my fault. How the hell? I don't even know how to make that connection, right? General bias, right? Bias in general is a very, very large topic, but bias is essentially story, right? It's your story that you're telling yourself that changes perception of reality. There's no real reality because reality is neither good or bad, right? Nothing in the world is good or bad. It's all relative, right? Everything's relative. What's good for you may be bad for her, right? And vice versa, right? If you got the job that she left or was pushed out of or whatever, and that sucks, by the way, but kudos to you for leaving the job. That's amazing because you're happy now. It's great. But if you were forced out of a job and you took that job, right? Financially, it's a bad thing for you. Good thing for you. But mentally, it's a good thing for you. Not so much for you. This place sucks, apparently. So, you know what I mean? It's all relative. Imposter syndrome is something that he mentioned it earlier. I forgot his name, but the attorney friend of mine back there mentioned that nowadays millennials don't deal with the whole midlife crisis type situation where they have a job that they've been in for so long. But on the flip side, they deal with imposter syndrome, where they don't know what they are, right? They don't feel authentic to who they are. And I'm sure some of you dealt with that over the years as well. I know I did. When I first started coaching, it's hard to tell someone, yeah, I'm a coach. I was this before, but now I was that, and then now I'm a coach. And yeah, sure. How do you switch jobs, right? How do you honestly take a position you were in for 20 years or 5 years or 10 years, and then switch to a completely different career and say you did this, right? I was an attorney, and I became a project manager in IT. I mean, yes, I'm Indian, but that doesn't mean I'm going to do IT all the time. So, there's a lack of self-awareness. It's really a big issue with a lot of things, right? And that's, like you said, the self-reflection is a huge deal. We'll get to that in a second. The other one's midlife crisis, right? And we'll get there in a second. So, some quick case studies. Sam. This is actually a true client, not Sam. But he was married to his high school sweetheart. They were married for a total of 15 years. Sorry, they were together 15 years. Married for the last 7 years. He was a husband first, and everything else second. And that's absolutely true. He let his career sit there while he paid for his wife to go to grad school, get a great career, do a great job, right? But he made it a point to keep earning income the whole time, right? She cheated on him, and they got divorced. His reaction is confusion, anxiety, severe depression. And I mean severe. Like, this guy was done. He didn't take his wedding ring off after the divorce for a year and a half. He couldn't face the idea of taking it off, right? When he finally took it off, he broke down crying because he wasn't used to that life. Like, that wasn't him. He was Sam. He was this girl's husband, right? Now, his whole thing was contextual identity, right? He focused on that for his entire life. He defined himself by her. He defined himself as her husband. He wasn't Sam first. He was her husband first, and Sam second. He didn't even know who Sam was actually by the time we talked about it, right? It took him some time to redefine and figure out what he really enjoyed about life, right? He needed constant external validation from her, and when he didn't get that, he would feel severely depressed. And that ultimately was actually what drove her away. Because she needed to constantly validate him all the time. Isn't that weird? Like, the one thing you prioritize, you put that thing above everything else, and that's the thing that messes you up. Funny how that works, right? That absolute identity was completely ignored, right? He never took time to figure out who he was or really define himself outside of anything contextual. That was his whole reality, right? He lived like a reality marvel. He lived in the fishbowl, right? So he had no idea who he was without the external influence. Eventually, he had to take the time to actually do the self-awareness exercises and really reinvent himself, recreate himself out of what he remembered from high school that he liked to do. He has to start back there, right? And so from that, he created time over the years. He didn't want to do stuff that they did together that he enjoyed because that was just too painful for him at the time. And so it took time, but the whole thing was, this is one of the downfalls of that, right? This essentially, it's like something that you married to your job, right? Like, Dave, first job out of high school, work was tolerable, but pay was good. Kept getting promoted, right? Like it's a bad thing. He kept getting promoted and decided again seeking another job. He's like, doing a great job, doing awesome. Same company for 19 years. Feels unfulfilled and bored. The same thing could be true if the company let him go, right? Either way, right? He's got to find himself now, figure out what's what. He's questioning his life choices. He has to make a drastic change, right? Again, primary focus was on contextual identity, but a different way. Professional this time, right? He was looking at the job, at the money, at the contextual circumstances. Like, it's great. It's a great situation to be in. You're making a lot of money, in theory, right? But if you're not really prioritizing yourself and your life, your personal life, then you can't really, what are you going to do? If you have no time to spend the money, what are you going to do with it? Right? What's the point of having all of that? He almost ignored himself again, right? He ignored who he was. Never took time to define or discover himself. And took the next logical job, right? He wasn't intentional about where he wanted to go or figuring out what the next logical step would be. He mentioned the next right step. I submit there is no right step, right? Because then that implies that they're wrong steps, right? Every step you take is going to be a step, as long as it's a step, an intentional step, it's a step in the right direction. All right? So, this is the general career life cycle, right? Let's work through this quickly. So, this is what happens, right? When you focus only on contextual identity, this could be sent career or personal life. You focus completely on contextual identity on this side, right? And later on in life, you start struggling to figure out what those things are, to rebalance them. It takes a lot more work, but it's not impossible. It's never too late. I forgot who said that too, but it's never too late, right? It's not about being too late or that kind of stuff. It's just a matter of like taking the time to figure it out and really spend time on that. So this, we talked about this. I like this a lot. Everyone always tells a story about themselves inside their own head. Always, all the time. That story makes you what you are. We build ourselves out of that story. We let the story define us, right? Whereas we can define that story. I always tell my clients, what story can you tell yourself that's going to change the situation for you, right? What story gives you back control? Because a lot of times these stories tell yourself to take away your control, right? It's easy. It's easier to say, rather than taking responsibility, it's easier to say, oh, that just, just happened to me, as opposed to it happened, and I can do this about it, right? Whether you can change that or not, it doesn't matter. That really is irrelevant whether you can change it or not. It's what can you do? What steps can you take from that? Amanda has more about syndrome. You can speak to this part. All these questions still relevant. So, in terms of story, this is not just for imposter syndrome. In general, this is for anything. What story are you telling yourself, right? First of all, is the story true? Is it just convenient to take responsibility off your back, or is it actually true, right? Is it what you want to be true? That's the second question, right? For that story, is it something that you want to be true, or is it something you want to change? If it's not something you want to be true, then change it. Whatever you got to do to change it. Go back to school. Go do some, take some classes, meet some people. Go out, be a different person, move to a different place. Relocate, change your habits. These stories can all change. New experiences can change your story. Self-awareness can change your story. Right? All right. Life isn't about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. You can create who you are. Your identity is completely within your control. Completely. Even the contextual stuff. You can choose to be in a different situation. It's not going to be easy all the time, right? I'm not saying it's easy. No one's saying it's easy. It's a different question. But it's possible. And as long as you acknowledge it's possible, that's the most important thing. So, quickly, how much time do we have left?
We're going to tack on time, so you have at least 15 more minutes.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll take 2 minutes this time. So, take a second, think to yourself, what story are you telling yourself right now that might be limiting you, right? How might it be limiting you? And then share with the person next to you. So take a second. If you feel comfortable sharing, again, no one has to share. If you feel comfortable, it's fine. Some things can be very personal, and I understand that. I want to acknowledge that. So if you don't feel comfortable sharing, you don't have to. But it helps to say sometimes out loud. So take a moment for yourself. Think about a story you're telling yourself, and determine, is it limiting you? If it is, how's it limiting you? How was that? That was difficult, right? Some people? How
Yeah,
was
very.
very difficult?
Yeah.
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable? Okay. You want to say more about that?
Well, I shared with my group that the absolute, what's the other one?
Contextual.
For me, it's been a struggle my entire adult life because I have been sort of like pigeonholed by friends and family to do this because you got to make a living, and my creative side is not validated by me or people around me. So because I don't validate it for myself, I can't communicate it because it has no value to me right now.
There you go. Yeah, that's powerful. Who can relate to that? Anyone? Yeah. It's tough to identify these stories, right? And it can be painful to face them. Honestly, right? It can be really painful because this kind of conversation is not something that comes up every day, right? It's actually something we're encouraged not to do, right? I mean, think about the course of your life, right? You go to college. You're supposed to pick a major in college. When you're 18 years old, you can't even drink yet, and they're like, pick a major that's going to determine the rest of your life. Determine the course of your life right now when you're 18 years old, right? You just got the right to vote, right? And you now determine the rest of your life, where your life goes. How is that possible? How is that actually a realistic expectation at that point in time? Right? It makes no sense, right? And so for reality life, I mean, real introspection starts when you're like in your 20s, anyway, right? I mean, how many people actually had experiences that really they could say were meaningful to their lives in terms of defining who they are or seeing who they are internally when they're before like 22, so like meeting people and really finding yourself, right? Well, you go ahead. No, sorry. You can go next.
Oh no, I'm not saying. I'm just raising my hand to
okay,
whatever you're saying.
I was going to say, it goes back to what I said in my day. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to get into financial business transactions and eventually become a lawyer doing that. So my educational path, I pre-chose, maybe not always at school, but they had to choose me. But I went in, but I was always that way in high school. I knew what I wanted to do. I was confident and self-assured about what I wanted. And quite honestly, there was not as many choices as there are today, because, business and industry has changed.
Sure.
But I have, not to, brag, although I've made sure I had a stellar educational. I went to Wharton undergrad, Ivy League. It's the only school I applied to. I went to NYU for law and a Master of Laws. So, and I did a Master of Laws as an extra year because I knew where I wanted to focus my law. And so it was like, this was my path, but I knew it from the beginning.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's different today. So that's how I got where I am, because it was like I didn't have any other options. I mean,
you said something that kind of contradicts what you said before. So you just said you don't have any other options, but you said you chose where you wanted to go. So you have no other options. There's one path. It's not a choice.
Well,
right?
No one made me do it.
No, I'm not saying no one has to have made you. It's not about someone else making you, right? If you felt like you had no other options, though, then that's not a choice. I'm not saying you didn't choose. I'm just saying that you probably had other options that you still chose. But when you just said at the end that you didn't have any other options for that, that's a different statement than what you said before that.
Well, maybe it was a little confusing, but when I say there's no choice, I couldn't think of anything else that I wanted to pursue instead.
Okay.
I'll make it positive and say you were focused. That's all I'm saying.
Well, no, I mean, I appreciate that, but I think our words are the most powerful things we have, right? And there's a reason that he said what he said. We don't have time to jump into that right now, but what I'm saying is I would never want to rephrase something what someone else says unless I'm trying to make up understand what they're saying. But I would say that there's a reason he said what he said, and it's underlined to everything else, what you went through. Because we're going down a path that we could talk more about, but I mean, I think that experience is, I think, in the grand scheme of things, that the majority of people don't have that experience. I think some people do have that experience like you did, and that's great. I mean, for me, I wanted to be a lawyer when I was 8 years old, right? And I became an attorney. Circumstances, whatever, my choices led me down a different path, right? And so I would say that there's a certain certainty for different parts of your life, right? And different situations that happen. And you can have different, like your absolute identity can change over time. Like I said, if you're intentional about what your absolute identity is, about how you want to change and grow, you can absolutely change that. I don't want it to sound like absolute is absolute for the rest of your life. It's absolute in that you know what that is, right? So that can absolutely change. But contextual is what you would describe as defining you the last year for your entire career, right? And so now it's a matter of aligning those things again and reshifting your absolute identity to be what you want it to be, right? Were you going to say something? Jean? Sorry. Were you going to say something?
Well, no, I just said what I wanted to say because, I mean, I was pretty much the same way. I knew what I wanted to do when I was 9,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And I kind of checked off the list. I'm good, right? And now I'm in this space where I'm like, oh, okay, like, what's next? And I think, when he was saying I don't have any other options, I think he, like, for me, I'm like, this is what I wanted to do. I'm good. And now that I have this, whatever it is, this time to reflect and to be like, oh, I can have more fun now. I mean, I was always having fun anyway, but I was able to have fun and do my work. And now I'm like, okay, like, let's make this all more fun. And I can kind of switch it up, make the fun first, and then the work second.
Sure.
So that's where I'm going. So I feel like when he was like, oh, I had no options, I think maybe I'm not putting words in your mouth, so I wouldn't dare do that. But I'm just listening to what you said, and I'm just like, oh, okay, well, oh yeah, I went to be a lawyer, I went to UPenn, I went to NYU, I did this and I did that, and I feel like you chose those things because probably you wanted to do those things, unless your parents were like, you better do it, and that's a whole other story. And then when you come to the end of the road, you're like, oh, what am I doing? I've done all this stuff, what do I do now? So that's what I hear when you're saying that stuff.
Sure.
But maybe under it all, when you say, oh, I had no other option, maybe the whole time you were like,
Oh, no. I never meant when I said I had no other option that anybody was forcing me. It was my choice and the only choice that I had in what I wanted to do. And so it wasn't like I was weighing, do I go this path or do I go this other path?
Right.
I only had one choice, so I didn't create or investigate any options
Gotcha.
for myself.
Okay, that makes sense. That's fine. Yeah. And Regine, to your point, priorities change over time too, in life, right? And that can be another reason. Like you can be sure down one path, and then when you fulfill that for yourself, when you achieve what you want to achieve on a certain path, your priorities can change. You can say, okay, now I want something else. Now it's going to matter finding that other thing that lights me up, right? And that's totally reasonable as well. Again, that's still identity question, right? It's like now that I've obviously outgrown that situation. Now I want to grow into something else. What do I want to grow into? That's another question. It's still identity. No question.
perfect, thank you.
No problem. Sorry. So, how do you overcome identity misalignment or imbalance? These are different ways. I mean, self-awareness is the biggest deal, right? That's the biggest thing you can do for yourself. Increasing self-awareness, try new activities, to go out, experience different things. Looking for notice patterns in behavior. The easiest way to do that is keep a journal of some sort, or some kind of record. For those people who don't like the word journal because it's too foo-foo, keep a record of some sort, right? Keep voice notes if you want to. Think about keep a record of your thoughts and your experiences. How do you react to certain things? You'll see patterns that you didn't realize were there. You'll see stories underneath the stories, right? Because there's different things that happen. There's events that happen, and then the story you tell yourself about those events. When you can separate those two things, then you realize what your beliefs about the world are. Practicing in different ways than you're used to. Have conversations with people that might be uncomfortable. Start with yourself, though. Start having uncomfortable conversations with yourself, right? Get out of your comfort zone in terms of realizing that there are other perspectives out there, including your own, that you don't want to necessarily accept, right? Be okay being uncomfortable, because that's where real growth happens. As long as you're comfortable, you're not going to grow. Focus on the future, right? The question is, where do you want to go? Where do you want to be there? And we'll get to that question in a second right now, actually. So first questions. How do you define yourself? Right, this can be as short or as long as you want it to be. Right, I love the what's it called, a teammate?
Right.
Yeah, it's a great exercise, because it's like, what do you want, right? What do you want out of your situation right now? Where are you going? Where do you want to be, right? That's a great question, because that's part of your identity, right? What are your most important traits? What are the best things about you, right? What do you want people to know about you in different contexts? Personally, might be different from professionally, right? What gives you your value? What's the most valuable thing about you? And that might be different from your traits, right? What my value is about two things. One, the value you bring to someone else, and the value you bring to yourself. Two separate questions, right? And then what stories you tell yourself on a regular basis. And that is, again, a deeper question, right? Something you can only come to by really taking a record of what you do and what you believe and how you experience things. And then how you relate to the world as a result of that. And then what areas do you want to grow and develop?
It's interesting because you mentioned the imposter syndrome and the imbalance between the contextual and absolute identities. But it's interesting to note that some of the most successful people across society, be it in business or politics, entertainment, so on and so forth, have struggled with this idea of being an imposter.
Yep.
And they've used it as a motivation to do even more.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, ideally, they come to a realization that I am who I am.
Yeah. Your toughest critic is yourself, right? So the person you got to convince more than anybody else in the world is yourself. So keep pushing harder, and then you convince yourself eventually, right? Now we don't have time to talk about affirmations, but affirmations are really powerful in that way, right? Every morning, a lot of my clients do positive affirmations. Again, it sounds really foo-foo, but it's really powerful. The most important voice you will hear in your life is your own voice. Saying things out loud matters. Right? You know that whole Harry Potter thing, abracadabra, whatever it's called, like the abracadabra thing. That actually that comes from an old, I forgot if it's Hebrew or Sumerian, but it's abracadabra actually means what I speak into creation. So I create what I speak. Right? That's where it comes from. The whole idea of magic is like I create what I speak, so I create out of nothing. But that's true because you create your life by what you speak. What you say happens will happen for yourself. As long as you try for it, take action towards it. So, activity, light yourself up. This is an activity for taking home, because we were wrapping up. But, if you go into this option. So, think of the past year, 3 years, 10 years, longer if you want, right? What have been your top 3 moments, or your top 5 moments, or both, right? Write them down. Look for patterns, and I mean the things that really, like moments that really light you up, that you remember the top of your head. Don't second guess them. Don't think about, what's the right answer. There's no right answer. Whatever comes to your head first, that's the right answer. Write that down, right? Top 3 moments, top 5 moments. Write them down. See if there's a pattern, right? Then, the uncomfortable question, think about your worst 3 moments and your worst 5 moments in the last year, 3 years, 5 years. So it can be very, very painful moments. But analyze them. What are the patterns, right? Look at what you're afraid of, right? Look at what hurt you. Look at what these things are. And obviously, if you've been through some serious trauma, don't do that. But I would say investigate in a safe situation, right? As long as it's not too serious for you, for something that you feel like you're going to cause issues for yourself, don't do this as deeply as you want, as you could. But definitely the best 3 moments, right? But look for patterns in terms of what lights you up and what brings you down. There will be a pattern there of some sort, right? All right, so I'll close with this last quote. Long one, but unlike a drop of water which loses its identity when it joins the ocean, man does not lose his being in society in which he lives. Man's life is independent. He's born not for the development of society alone, but the development of himself. So we're here to develop ourselves as much as to develop society, right? But I also ask you to look around the room, to other people here in the room, and help each other out if you can. If for you to become friends, that's powerful. The power of community cannot be understated. Overstated, sorry. It's often understated, but it can't be overstated. There's a reason that all these classes and all these things have accountability buddies, right? That's really powerful. Accountability is huge. But also just being able to share your stories, it's very powerful. How does it feel when you share? I don't want to put you on the spot, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
But how does it feel when you share every day?
I can I can feed off of the energy in the room, but I was still afraid. I still felt fear.
Sure.
But because of the energy, it kind of empowered me to say anything.
There you go. Energy is real, by the way, right? Energy is a real thing. Everything we have in our lives is energy. It's not positive or negative. We make it that way, right? We can turn negative energy into positive energy. It takes effort, but we can do it. Any questions?
Well, just existentially, it's a big one, but I mean, I do think, and perhaps more for women, that external validation is a actual value for your identity.
Well, I'm not saying it's not. Absolutely it is.
Right.
It's just a matter of you can't prioritize that over internal validation.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
But
It has to be a balance.
could it be one of your three? One of your top three, though, is
Absolutely.
wanting to make sure that who's around you, your family, whatever,
100%.
is very important, and that's worth you shaping a little bit for too.
100%. And I don't want you to feel like there's any wrong answer to those questions.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's not. It's just
No,
a matter
I'm
of.
questioning the boundary between
Sure.
actual and contextual.
There's
absolute and contextual. Yeah.
There's a boundary,
Yeah.
but it can be very blurred sometimes.
Yeah.
Or appear blurred. In reality, when you look at it and really dissect it, you'll see the distinction.
Yeah.
But
I get
there's
it
no wrong answer.
intellectually. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no wrong answer though. I want to drive that home. You shouldn't be like, oh, that's the wrong thing to be excited about. No, it's not about that. It's about what really lights you up. That's just reality, right? That's what really lights you up. That's what lights you up. Go after that, right?
Yeah. Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you sort of recommend if one is going to try to go through a process of making that change, if there's like resistance in your environment? Like,
There's going to be resistance, 100%.
so how do you sort of deal with that? Like if you're trying to change the framework in terms of your family structure or other people that sort of place you in the box that you had sort of talked about earlier, what if that environment is still around you and people are not necessarily accepting that change? Do you know what I mean?
So, it could be a longer question to answer, but a short version is this. So find people you trust, like a core group of people you see on a regular basis that you really trust. It can be your accountability group or it can be your community, and be honest with them. Be like, hey, listen, I'm not undergoing, but I'm investigating myself right now. I'm on a journey right now to really discover and see if I'm really on a path to be happy. And here's what I need from you, right? I just need you to be open and hear me out or whatever, or just say nothing, right? Or if I come to you with this question or these kind of, because sometimes the people in your life can give you the most insight to yourself. So asking those questions, having this conversation with people like, hey, how do you see me? You know, how do you see me in this context? You know, what do you see? What do you think I can improve on if I want to do X? Always have a goal in mind to what you're looking at, but get that feedback, right? It can be very, very powerful. Obviously, choose the people that you ask this question to carefully, because that can really, those are vulnerable questions to have. The vulnerability is huge. Anybody know Brene Brown?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. If anyone who has not read her work on vulnerability, it's amazing. For men and women, it's really, really powerful. But being vulnerable to people that matter to you is one huge step you can take towards self-discovery and self-awareness. But that's also going to build that trust and build that support that you need, right? And if you can't get that from people in your life, you meet with people. I'm not saying leave them aside. I'm just saying have different situations for what you're looking to do for yourself, right? Create new situations for yourself where you can grow, right? And some people are going to look at you and be like, oh, you're not the same, you know, something's off about you or whatever, and they may not be comfortable with that, because some people, and I don't want to talk about anyone, but some people just like you in a certain box because it's convenient for them, right? Like your situation, you know, they knew you as that and they were comfortable with you as that, but if you got bigger than that, it might make some people uncomfortable. God forbid people get uncomfortable. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.